Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. This time, Ensign Rowe. Ensign Rowe. Guess what? Spoiler alert. We're fans. We're sure you are. Ensign Rowe on this episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. You know what else which shows what a big fan you are of us, or maybe Ensign Rowe, and what big fans we are of you? Become a Patreon donor. Yeah. Go to patreon.com/IABD. And for as little as 6 cents a day, you can get special bonus content from us, from the Mothership, IABD Radar, and much, much more. There are many other levels. Hey, maybe be the big daddy. Be the big daddy of IABDpresents.com. Become one of our big Patreon. Get to that highest level. Maybe you'll be like Ensign Rowe, as we discussed Ensign Rowe on It's All Been Tricked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy Jerome. And if you notice something different about us in this episode, we're not drinking alcohol as we usually do.
I did have a alcoholic beverage at brunch this morning.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. And there's possibility the alcohol from last night is still running early.
Well, I'm sober.
Isn't it early for brunch?
Yeah, I guess it's just breakfast. Yeah.
It is 10 a.m. on a Saturday to break the wall. But I'm just not used to doing this podcast without an alcoholic beverage, except it seemed too early for me. So, oh well.
So you shouldn't have gone to bed. It was the problem.
I should have stayed up all night like I was still in college.
I feel like I did.
So, first impressions of Ensign Rowe.
I actually wrote in a first impression for that question, which was, I don't know if it's first, but I liked that it was a mixture of political intrigue of a kind that I like for Star Trek, at least.
Sure.
I've come to enjoy those kinds of things. And I think that's good for the world building of the series overall.
I thought it was smart. I thought it was intriguing, if not exciting. So maybe I thought it was less than the sum of its parts, but not a bad episode. I still thought it was interesting. And Ensign Rowe is obviously a very interesting character.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was a very strong episode. There were some things that are not quite line up with what I thought I know about Bajorans, but then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I'm not sure it contradicts anything I know about Bajorans, but this whole wandering nomad gypsy-like existence is not the way we see Bajorans later, but that's because in DS9, the station is next to their planet, the planet Bajor, and the Cardassians have pulled out. It's immediately following the aftermath of Bajor being released by the Cardassians. They talk about them traveling the galaxy, but I would imagine a lot of them probably came back once they were given their home world back, and that's probably part of why it feels different, because they're not wanderers there, but they're still dealing with political strife and the fallout from what the Cardassians did to them. And obviously we're going to spend a lot of time with the Bajorans in DS9.
Since you're saying Bajor, and it reminded me of a note I had to take there, because I noticed they were using some different terminology than they seem to do in DS9. They're referring to the people as Bajora.
Which made me think of Romas, like the name for the gypsies, right? The more politically correct name.
Perhaps.
I kept thinking they were calling them Bajorans, as in the pejorative sense of the
no. In the DS9, they generally refer to them as Bajorans, but here they did call them Bajora, like Keith said. And yeah. I think they had strong gypsy vibes, was what I took from it.
And sometimes when they were using the word Bajoran, it was of the culture, Bajoran culture.
Right.
And I think they might have said Bajoran people at one point, but certainly by DS9, I think they just use Bajoran for everything.
I did wonder why they made Rowe remove her earring. Like, Riker was very much like, that's not Starfleet appropriate or Starfleet dress code. And I'm like, but you make allowances in Starfleet for different cultures and religion. I mean, right. Worf wears the sash. Right. You know, why can't she wear the earring? And she does after this. I don't think we ever see her or really any Bajorans without earrings after this. They all wear the earrings. It's a religious thing. So I guess if they're not religious, they might not wear the earring, but it is a religious thing.
It seemed to be, just a punishment of some sort, or actually, a grudge.
That was one of my fashion notes was, I like her earrings. It's a Bajoran thing. So
yeah. It was strange to me and felt wrong that they made her take it off. I'm glad they don't continue to do so.
Yeah. That doesn't seem the Starfleet way.
Yeah. While we're on fashion, One of my first notes about fashions, what did you think of the barbershop uniforms? Were they the same as we saw last time? I can't remember.
That's a good question. Maybe.
We actually got a name for the barber this time. The one that was played by Ken Thorley. Mott is his name, and that's what he will be known as going forward.
So that scene was my first note. It wasn't about the fashion, but it seemed like a missed opportunity or something that would have played a little differently today. So you had Mr. Mott sort of criticizing the captain. Not criticizing might be too strong a word, but like, here's what I would have done, doing it like the whole armchair captain thing, which I thought was hilarious. But I think these days they'd probably throw in like a lot of Reddit references or something, or at least refer not even necessarily saying Reddit out loud, but they would refer to things that people actually talk about on the internet for like past episodes and get specific examples of, I think that you should have done blah, 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 to give the audience a voice and give them a little nod.
That's very much the way it would have been handled on the Orville, for sure. Yeah, talking about the Romulans and as he manhandles Picard around, I'm like, he's the only person on the ship, I think, other than Guinan that can treat Picard that way. Picard just puts up with it. Like, he's very uncomfortable. But then Riker makes the comment, he's the best coiffer in Starfleet.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, at least in my opinion, you want to maintain a good relationship with your hairdresser.
Sure.
I've had the same one for 20 years, so I don't know what I do. I just wrote down hairdressers are very wise. So they have a lot of good ideas.
I mean, if you don't want to talk, I get that they have a barbershop on the Enterprise, and I can see why, but can't you just use the holodeck? Like, have any barber you want and then not have to put up with the annoying barber?
I guess
Wow. Keep forgetting the holodeck can be used for things.
Yes, it can.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good point. Why wouldn't he just get a different hairdresser?
Right. Like, even if he can't go in there without hurting Mott's feelings and pick somebody else, like I said, there are other options.
Yeah. And of course, I'm discriminatory because I have a lot of hair and Picard doesn't. So I'm like, what are you there for? Because I felt like we should have just seen him getting his head shined rather than actually getting his hair cut.
They trimmed what was all the stuff around the edges. He's still got hair.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about the Bajorans as terrorists early in this episode. I mean, I obviously knew what was going on with the Cardassians and everything from the beginning. Did you get the impression, Stephen being less familiar, that they were like terrorists that shouldn't be trusted? Or could you tell right away that it was something more than that?
I immediately thought, I know they've leaned into this in other episodes too. It's kind of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict kind of analogy. Yeah, I got that part of it. So, it was definitely part of a who's Zoom and who kind of thing. Who do you trust here? But yeah, I did have an inkling that, things are not as they seem. Otherwise, what we're going to do for the next 45 minutes. But, I definitely hadn't sussed out exactly what was going on.
Yeah, this was a very negative view of Starfleet politically and the Federation politically, that they're willing to put up with the Cardassians and not do anything to help the species that are being subjugated by the Cardassians against their will. And I was thinking about that because I'm like, that doesn't feel very Starfleet-y to let that happen. But then I'm also thinking there are races like that in the Romulan Empire we'll see later, and probably in the Klingon Empire, and you can't just go to war with these major powers. And I think what's missing for me is I just never felt like the Cardassians as being as big and important as the Klingons and the Romulans, but they kind of are. I mean, and we'll see obviously a lot more Cardassian stuff going forward. And they get into an alliance where they're the little guy in the alliance. So I guess maybe that's why I think of them as being a smaller power, but that's how they're presented here is, they're like this huge major power, and defying them means going to war with them. And you don't want to go to war all the time just to go to war. So it's that political issue of, every time we see injustice in the world, should America go in and invade and institute our will, or should we let it happen in their territory? Where's the balance of fighting for what's right and maintaining peace?
So it's not always even just peace, but the status quo. So let's say that there's this, they don't even have to be that powerful, but I mean, powerful enough to have some sort of mutual interest or some sort of trade agreement or some pre-existing alliance. And you you don't really find out about what they've done until after that.
Right.
Whoever's in charge at Starfleet, and this is, you have probably a smaller circle of admirals or whoever making these kinds of decisions. They're probably gonna be more like I can't remember his name. The guy we're going to find out about later in the episode, or the admiral who deploys Ro, essentially.
He's played by Cliff Potts, Admiral Kennelly.
Yes.
Cliff Potts, best known for Last Ride of the Dalton Gang, Silent Running, For Love and Honor. He's got 69 credits, still alive, not active though, only 2 credits after 1999. He's somebody that looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't tell you where I've seen him from. I mean, he did a few episodes of Dallas, a few episodes of Murder, She Wrote, but nothing really stands out in his resume.
Well, yeah. So you have people like that making decisions. They're not really going to care as much about some. They're going to see the surface impressions. There are some terrorists or rebels or whatever, or a smaller society that can't really affect them very much. So why bother?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little simplistic to say why bother, but yeah, this admiral obviously was being blackmailed into skipping to the end, being blackmailed into doing what he was doing. He wasn't just causing trouble because he was a bad admiral. He was obviously a bad admiral because he allowed himself to be blackmailed. But
blackmailed? I don't remember what the leverage was there. I thought it was
they gave him a disease, didn't they?
Yeah, but
and he had to get rid of him, and then they gave him. Then he was cured of his disease.
Did they say that explicitly?
They said he gave him a Cardassian cold, which was apparently pretty bad, and then later he was cured of the cold, and Picard's speech indicated that that's what I took from it, was that they had infected him and withheld the cure until he cooperated.
I didn't get that at all. I
thought he was faking that he was sick, and then they were saying, they must have cured you. Something must have happened that made you feel better now. Because I thought we cured the common cold.
This was the Cardassian cold.
Uncommon cold.
Yeah, this was a different cold.
I don't know why
COVID 302.
I don't know why they wouldn't be more explicit about something like that if it were that much of a plot point. It seemed more like he was just corrupt or at least careless.
Yeah.
We already kind of talked about how they're wonders. They were forced off their planet, which isn't completely in line with what we see later, because many of the Bajorans are still on the planet as slaves and living under the occupation. So they weren't all forced off. I guess that's what Starfleet's encountered, are the ones that have been forced off the planet. Picard says there were generations of sympathy and promises is all we've offered to the Bajorans. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds familiar. Way too familiar. Picard doesn't trust Ro not because she's Bajoran, because they mentioned there are other Bajorans in Starfleet, which I'm like, okay, I guess if these people were forced off decades ago, there's been plenty of time to have some join the fleet. But he doesn't trust her because she was court-martialed, because she broke the rules and got in trouble and was sent to prison. This will not be the last time we get a major character in Starfleet that is taken out of prison and becomes a lead character. Oh, she doesn't really become a lead character on the show, but in Voyager, the Tom Paris, we first meet him in prison and he's one of the leads. And Discovery, we first meet Michael Burnham in prison. Well, not first meet her, but we see her in prison and then she becomes a lead. So there's definitely going to be a history of these people, characters that we know and love and believe in, that were in prison for one reason or another, which I guess helps break down that like perfect Starfleet Federation view even further.
So does Keneally bring Royal in because she'll gum things up? She'll screw things up the way he wants her to, or?
Essentially, it seems like he chose her because she didn't have any choice but to follow his orders and do something covert for him.
That's right, yeah.
And he knew Picard wouldn't go along with it. So yeah.
That makes sense.
Riker calls her Ensign Lauren. Given that they've talked about several Bajorans in Starfleet, you'd think they'd know that the last name, family name comes first. But then on the other hand, they had a plausible explanation where Ro was basically like, well, they're just trying to assimilate. So they're going along, getting along and not correcting you. And I'm like, okay, I guess that makes sense. The other Bajorans we meet from here on out all stick to that. First name is family name. Second name is given name.
And her name does sound like 2 first names, to be fair.
Yeah. Ro and Lauren.
Lauren, yeah.
Laren, but it sounds like Lauren.
Yeah. First, I like her luggage. We have talked about this before. I think the future of luggage is bright. I think luggage in the 24th century, I'm not sure if people just travel lighter or somehow things can get compressed, but I like the look of all those. And then, but to get back to Ro, when she first comes on and everything, essentially her response to everything is, well, nothing's going to work. I don't know why you're bothered. She's definitely the one who's like, why bother? I don't. And then I was like, well, why are you here? I mean, if your whole thing is like, and I guess that is why she's here for Keneally to an extent. But
Better than prison is what she was said.
Yeah.
Which is weird because when we see the prisons later on, they seem pretty idyllic.
Didn't seem too bad.
But I guess being trapped in a place and not being able to leave is the problem.
Yeah, I guess.
Starfleet prisons are like getaway spas, but they mentioned that Bajoran culture is much older than humanity. I mean that plays into later stuff as well in the stories, but I dig the idea of this old culture, and I think it adds more credence to, or helps color the characterization of the people as like a fallen civilization, essentially. Rose sure has a smart mouth, both with Starfleet and with her own people, so that's just her personality.
Yeah, I like when Troy and I think it's Crusher are like in 10-4 like, do you mind if we join you? And she says,
Yep.
Yes. I'm like, I appreciate her honesty.
Yeah, but so my note about that was, were they just sent to her because they're women, or did they just happen to walk in and see her? Like with Picard and Riker, like, go chummy up to her because you're women like her, which would have been super sexist. And then we get right after that Geordi like complaining about Rhoda Guinan for no reason. And once again, I hate the character of Geordi LaForge. Like, he's terrible in that moment. Thankfully, Guinan like takes it as a challenge. And I love her insight of like, if you really wanted to be alone, you would have stayed in your quarters, but you're out here. And that was really clever. And once again, a really good use of Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, both in that scene and when she goes to Picard and she's like, this is my friend, listen to her. And Picard's like, okay, then I'll change my mind, or at least keep an open mind where he wouldn't have before.
Benson Rowe was just a lot for that first part of the episode, to establish that. And I was noting that just every single second that she's on screen, she's just like screaming body language, just, arms crossed and, oh, I hate this. And you guys, and as Stephen was saying. And of course, the outfit in my background should have been in the fashion note. Have you ever seen this variation on a uniform? Did she do this? Is this allowed? I mean,
that was my first fashion note as well, Keith, was her Rose away mission look. Sun's out, guns out.
Well, she was wearing the regular uniform when they beamed down, and then she took off the top, and that's what's underneath the top. So presumably they're all wearing that underneath. In fact, that was one of my notes, is she's clearly wearing the regular uniform with her badge on it. And then she takes off the jacket, and I rewound and watched this. As she's taking off the jacket, you don't see the badge on the jacket anymore, but we never see her remove it. And then she hands the jacket to the little girl, and her badge is hanging lopsided, crooked on her undershirt. Obviously, it's fixed by the time you get to the shot in Keith's background. But there was there must have been something cut or deleted in editing where she removed the badge from a uniform so she could put it back on the undershirt, because she has to keep the badge. But yeah, that's just what's under the normal uniform, apparently. I mean, we see Picard in like the films take off the jacket, and they has a similar undershirt.
Yeah, I must not have been looking at the screen when she took the jacket up. I didn't realize. I thought she just beamed down like that.
No, she was wearing the regular uniform when she beamed down.
Weird. So are they all supposed to open like the one that Picard is wearing there? Would that open the same way? I mean, it doesn't seem like it would.
I mean, by the way they presented in this episode, yes. Hers zipped straight down the middle, which we've seen the variations. Some of them zip down the middle, and some of them like are on the side. It's hard to tell in the picture you've got if Picard's wearing one that zips down the middle. It looks like there might be a faint crease right down the middle.
Huh. They all look like onesies to me.
They do, but if you look closely, when they redesign the uniforms after the first couple seasons where they have the cheap material, then you could see a like zipper down the front, and that's what is coming off. But yeah, I liked the look. I liked the characterization of that. The only question I had about that colony as they're like investigating it is they mentioned that there's not enough food and water and blankets and stuff. And I'm like, do they not have replicators? And if not, why doesn't Starfleet just give them a couple replicators instead of replicating blankets? We've seen Starfleet willingly give replicators to races before, or colonies.
Are they advanced enough to warrant a replicator, first of all?
Yeah, they could use a replicator. They're a much older civilization. They've been around a long time.
No, I mean,
But if you give people a replicator, they'll eat for a day. But
if you teach them how to build a replicator,
they'll eat forever.
No, I mean, we find out the next episode that there is a similar plot point where it's a colony that's using rations of some sort, and it's supposedly there are replicators on the way eventually, so maybe they can't really just keep handing them out as freely as they would like to.
I mean, maybe there's a waiting list in the Bajorans because of who they are, just far down the waiting list and haven't got it yet, or they never requested it because they're too proud. I don't know. But when Picard offered them blankets, I think he should have offered them a replicator in that moment. They mentioned Ro didn't defend herself in the court martial, and 8 people died, which is that's no wonder she's a little bit chip on her shoulder. I think she's more mad at herself than anyone. I love the character, and it really, I mean, she'll be in a few more episodes of Next Gen. I can't remember how many total. This is Michelle Forbes. She's best known for California with a K, Escape from LA, True Blood, The Hunger Games. More recently, she's been in Big Sky, Berlin Station, Powers, The Return, The Killing. She's got so many credits. She was in the original In Treatment. She's from Texas, actually. But yeah, she's got 72 credits, which I think it would be more, but a lot of them are big, long arcs. So she did some Walking Dead episodes, Prison Break, 24, Battlestar Galactica. She was great in Battlestar Galactica.
Solid episode of Seinfeld. She's George's girlfriend that hands Elaine the big salad and accepts the thanks from Elaine. Makes George angry. And then eventually when he finds out that when she finds out that George was mad about that, she breaks up with him. He was mad about the big salad.
Yeah, as far as Trek, remember she played that other character last season, Dara, in Half a Life. She will be in 8 episodes over the next 2 seasons as Ensign Ro Lauren. So we're going to get to know her better than most of those guest stars that come and go, but she's never a lead on the series, unfortunately. Now, she was offered the lead role on Deep Space Nine. She was supposed to go the spinoff with O'Brien, that she would be the first officer. And when Michelle Forbes turned down that role, and I'm still sad she did, I guess she didn't want to get pigeonholed in Star Trek, they replaced her with a very similar character named Kira Nerys, played by Nana Visitor. And I love Nana Visitor in that role, and I think it would be quite different if it was Ro, because as hard as Kira is at the beginning, over time we see a lot of softness to her that I don't think would fit with Ro ever, no matter how much Ro evolved. So I guess in that way, I have a hard time saying I wish that she'd been there instead of Kira. At the same time, I do wish we had more Michelle Forbes. I know a lot of the book authors have loved continuing Ro's story post her TV appearances, but it's sad she's never been in a movie, and I really think she needs to show up on Star Trek Picard or something, because we need more from her, in my opinion.
Yeah,
when Ro beams down 6 hours early and then they beam down, then the first thing I could think of, I knew you guys would say, it's a draft.
I do like her iconoclastic rebel, I guess attitude, even though it comes off really rough at first, or like, I don't know if I like this person. She grew on me, obviously, but and maybe because she got the guns out, but her fashion sense started to soften me. But
well, I mean, in this scene, I think we got to see how pragmatic she was being about a lot of things, and of course the work with Guinan forced us to see her in a certain way, or forced her to reveal herself.
The Guinan's description of her as she's one of those people who just have their poles reversed was an interesting way to think of it. I liked that description, and I like the comparison where Guinan's like, we've both lost our homes, we've both been displaced. I trust Picard. You should trust Picard, basically. Ro confesses the Admiral's plan. I feel like she never gets soft, but that's where we see some of the vulnerability. I think that's where we see that she is a hero worthy of our time and not just an obstacle to make trouble in the episode.
Yep.
She does the right thing. And that whole story about her father being tortured to death in front of her, no wonder she is the way she is. Like the fact that she even decides to trust Guinan and Picard at all is kind of miraculous.
The thing I noted, I did note about that confession, or the story with her father. It reminded me a lot of like discrimination in this country, and probably just everywhere, really. It's something that's you don't really hear described very often. That feeling of how that being degraded in that way can make you hate yourself or sort of blame the people being, along with you who are being victimized rather than the oppressors, which is very interesting the way that they put that.
Which is kind of what we got into with the Redemption Part 2. The Seela's character did the same thing. She saw her mother get killed and went with her dad or stepdad, whatever it was.
I mean, it's a common, or not common, I should say common, but it's a understandable coping mechanism for what you've gone through, because you have to find some way to make sense of the world and the choices that have been made and the things that have happened to you. And so, that helps you frame your worldview as one you can live with. Rough stuff, though.
Yeah.
And we'll hear a lot about the atrocities the Cardassians have committed on the Bajorans, and it was ugly. It was real ugly. The occupying force thing, like, it's not like the U.S. occupying Japan or Germany. It's brutal, the things they did to them.
Yeah. I'm not going to. That invites certain kinds of speculation about the U.S. occupying different places and what may or may not have happened there that may not be as. So,
I should clarify that we've done some brutal atrocities in certain places at certain times. I meant kind of the widespread occupation, the way we occupied Japan being different than the way some regimes have occupied other places, which isn't to say that we're far from perfect and have done many bad things. Some of the stuff with our Guantanamo spring to mind and that kind of thing. But
hey guys, love it or leave it.
I'm still trying to build my rocket,
Sorry, I'm getting ready for my new Star Trek podcast, the right way.
For all those right-wing Star Trek fans that are angry that there are very few straight white men on the show just now.
Yeah, that's all we're going to talk about, actually.
Is there a thing that exists like that right now? Or so is that a reference to a name?
I hope not.
There are definitely some Star Trek fans that got upset in the same vein of the Star Wars fans that didn't like that.
Right.
Rey was a girl. But I think it's less prevalent in Star Trek than in some other franchises, primarily probably because you really had to have missed the entire point of what Star Trek is about to feel that way.
I would like to think so anyway.
Yeah.
But
I mean, for all of its faults, and obviously we've found plenty of sexism built into Star Trek, the ideal was everybody working together, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, a better version of mankind. So, yeah.
Well, I think that some of it speaks to how powerfully we are indoctrinated in this society to selectively ignore the things that we don't want to know about. As far as fandom and popular media, there are people who are going to willfully miss the point of everything and chalk that up to some other agenda that is being forced upon them. And if they even see the irony at all, if they're even capable of noticing anything beyond this,
Speaking of indoctrination, I mean that's what's happening in our colleges right now. Liberal professors.
Yeah. You mean the liberal professors that just teach the kids how to think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We don't want them to learn how to think.
I will be introducing legislation to stop that.
Oh, God, Stephen, if you were actually like that, you would no longer be welcome on this podcast. Although if you're in the true spirit of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, I guess we need to let the bigots in.
Oh.
No, seriously though, yeah, we would not be doing this podcast.
No. So we'd love to have new guests, but don't apply if that's your actual.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you haven't been vaccinated, because but I don't know, we probably shouldn't discriminate against the unvaxxed.
I will.
No, I'm back in my right way.
I don't care if we are doing this on Zoom. If you haven't been vaccinated, don't come on this podcast.
I do have an anecdote
unless
about
it's like for a reason like you're underage or you have a immune system that's compromising. Your doctor told you not to. There are reasonable.
You're from Krypton, whatever.
Yes, those kind of things. But in general, don't listen to us. If you're that, never mind. I'm going to cut all that from the podcast anyway, and I'm pretty sure our Patreon donors are not falling into that category, I hope. Picard, what did you think of Picard's trick of letting the Bajoran ship be destroyed in order to expose what was going on?
Well, I think like that. Yeah, I think fun is the wrong word, but that's the first thing that popped in my head. Yeah. I enjoyed the way that this is the thing I love when you have Kardashians in the episode, or the things, the Romulan encounters and things like that, where it's that kind of the Cold War banter of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was cool, and I can't remember if we saw the Kardashian ships last time. I'm sure we did, but I like the way they look.
Well, it was similar to how we saw it last time, and we'll see a lot more of them. Goldolok, I think is how you pronounce it, was played by Frank Collison. That would have been the lead Cardassian. He's best known for the new Twin Peaks, Silicon Valley, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He has over 100 credits, still very active actor. I thought he was interesting. He also looked a little odd. His picture does not look so odd. But the way they had the makeup and stuff, his head looked misshapen, which I thought, and maybe it was just the angle or whatever, but I thought that made it even more interesting and more alien looking. Unfortunately, this is the only next gen episode, but he is in uncredited, according to IMDb, 2 episodes of DS9 as the same character, both times uncredited. And they both look like first season episodes. So we'll see.
So speaking of looking alien, I had a brief note about Orta, which I just said thought he embodied a lot of the kind of like heavy sci-fi we hadn't been getting a lot of in the series up to this point. But yeah, the things we usually say we want to see more of. I mean, it was all embodied in the makeup and just the implied history and his explanation for things, and just.
Yeah, I thought his look was really cool, and yeah, I agree completely with you, Keith. I had the same note. I just thought his look was interesting and what he had to say, and it was, we had that whole Crusher episode where she's with the Stockholm Syndrome episode, or at least one of them that we didn't like so much. I mean, it was a similar kind of thing where she was with the quote unquote the rebels or the whatever. I thought this guy was much more interesting, even though it was in a smaller time. Obviously, his look helped, and I thought the makeup was top notch for that too.
So the one Bajoran, Orta, was that the freedom fighter?
Yeah, that's the one that they were sent to find, essentially.
So he was played by Jeff Hyenga, who only has 29 credits. He also is listed as uncredited in the same 2 episodes of DS9. So I wonder if they show a clip from this episode in those 2 episodes or something. I'm not sure. Or if this is an IMDb mistake. He doesn't have very many credits, and it's still listed as Orta. And then the other Bajoran, Keith Fowler, who was head of the colony, is played by Scott Marlowe, best known for The Subterraneans, Days of Our Lives, Bronco. He was much more active before this appearance, and he actually passed away in 2001. So this was his only Star Trek credit.
In that Deep Space Nine episode, is it the Telosians who are showing the old ships?
Let's see. Telosian Part 1, Telosian. No, the Telosians aren't in DS9. But it wouldn't surprise me if they were, because, like I said, that DS9 has a lot of original series references. Yeah, Dumb Admiral fooled by Cardassians, I wrote down. And Picard does a public shaming on him. Where he's like, let's talk in the ready room. And Picard's like, nope. Let's put this on the bridge. Yeah, everybody gets to see your embarrassment. I think Picard did it for his own protection as much as anything, but the public shaming aspect was nice.
Yeah.
Well, see, that was what I was saying before. I think that if he had been blackmailed, that wouldn't have been necessarily. Wait,
yeah, maybe
necessarily. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was just a little notice. It was funny to me. It struck me as funny that when they said that the other ship didn't have video capability, it just sounded so backward all of a sudden. Like I got so judgmental, like, oh God, wow, that must be a hunk of junk. They don't have video conferencing on that,
Well,
they have a spaceship, but it was like I'm judging them because they can't.
Well, they're rebels. They've lost their planet. They've lost their, a lot of what I think this is we haven't got to the Maquis yet on Star Trek, but that is a large part of the Maquis are Bajorans, and they have to scramble together whatever ships they can get. And it's an ongoing arc of people whose planets have been ceded to other powers in treaties that are rebelling against Starfleet. Bajor and being one of they're characters that we'll meet. That it's an ongoing thing, the Maquis, through DS9 and Voyager. So we'll get into that more.
Do they? I usually don't even ask questions like this, but I don't remember. Do we get the Maquis before or during TNG?
Probably,
TNG?
But I'm not 100% sure. Probably, but that's what these reminded me of. Is they were very similar to the Maquis, except it was all Bajoran. Whereas the Maquis have different races in them, including lots of Bajorans. Picard convinces Ro to stay on the ship. She's really reluctant, but I was extremely gratified because, like I said, I want to see more of Ro Lauren. And I remember, I don't think I'd seen this episode before, but I remember her from other episodes like I said, she's in 8 episodes and they're not all about her. Some of them are just regular episodes that she happens to be in as things happen. So I really wish they'd added her as a lead character since, you got rid of Wesley and you'd have some space, I would think.
Do you think that you would have bought it if you didn't know, or bought the slow pitch? Like, oh, well, I don't think I should do it. I don't think I'll fit in and blah, blah, blah. And do you think?
I think I would have bought that, but I think had I not known she was coming back, I would have assumed that would have gone nowhere. And I think it's much more common in Star Trek up to this point to have characters like that. And
true.
Even after being convinced to stay, we'd never see him again, or maybe we'd see him one more time. So it's really gratifying that she has 7 more episodes in the last 3 seasons of the show. I think there's only 1 episode in the final season. I think most of her appearances are in the next 2 seasons. And it's funny because when she's there, they act like she's part of the main crew, but she's not there most of the time, which is, bothers me a bit. But
I've got a bunch of randos. I thought the space station shot at the beginning was awesome. It was a nice effect. I don't know if it was a repeat, but it looked really good. And it just made me think, a lot of these colonies, I guess the purpose of having a colony is to colonize, but it seems like sometimes why not have a space station there and just kind of go back and forth rather than setting up a colony there? And maybe it's a cost benefits analysis they do to decide between a space station or maybe.
I think a colony would be a lot easier to set up than a space station.
I guess you're right. Space stations seem better and cooler, but yeah, they probably more problematic, cost more.
They couldn't raise enough money on Earth to build more space stations. Yeah. So
Guinan says to Ro, and at the end of the conversation, she says, "I believe truth is in the eye of the beholder." Ro says, "Isn't that supposed to be beauty?" And then Guinan says, "Truth, beauty works for a lot of things." Clearly, a reference to "Is there in truth no beauty?"
Clearly.
Okay.
This happened in this episode, and it reminded me of. I think this happened at least. I know it happened once and maybe twice in the original episode where Kirk's like, "Uhura, hailing frequencies," and she's like, "I can't get a hold of anyone." And Spock comes over, is like, "Let me try, woman." And Data did the same thing here because Troy's like trying to communicate and she can't get a hold of him. He's standing right next to her, goes ahead and does the same exact thing. It's like, is your communicator better than hers? Or do you just think since she's a woman, she's not using hers right? So I thought that was odd. Although at the same time, I think, if the 3 of us are, had to get a hold of somebody right now, we'd all 3 get out our phones, even if we were right next to each other. Like, you know what? Mine's not working either. So maybe it's something like that, but rather than a sexism thing. I thought the whole, the chicanery that the Admiral was trying to do, the whole, they're trying to make it look like these guys did it, but really these guys did it. If you're a 9/11 truther, it echoed kind of those 911's an inside job kind of things. That is not part of my right wing Star Trek podcast. And another allusion in there was I can't remember who says it. It might be Gunn that says this is the beginning of an interesting relationship. Definitely a Casablanca allusion there. One other thing, the location shots, and I just found these were in Griffith Park, which has been used over and over and over through Trek. There's actually I found a website that is kind of like, if you go to Griffith Park, here's where to go for this episode and this episode and this episode and that kind of stuff. It's also where the Griffith Park Observatory is, which is featured in Rebel Without a Cause and La La Land and numerous other movies. So those are all my rando notes.
While I was thinking about how many episodes Ro was in, I started looking at some of our other reoccurring characters. Guinan's in more episodes than Pulaski, but she is not in the final season at all. We only have 6 episodes of Guinan left over the next 2 seasons.
Wow.
And we only have 5 episodes of O'Brien left over the next season. And then he shows back up for the series finale, but Guinan wasn't in the whole final season, which surprises me. So we've got some very little Guinan and O'Brien left as we move towards the end of the series. It's weird to think that we're in the final 3 seasons because the original series had 3 seasons. So we almost have an entire original series left to get through, but we're getting
because they had other stuff like O'Brien was going into DS9. And
right. Yeah, that's why O'Brien's only in a few more episodes because after this season, he'll be on DS9.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, DS9 starts in season 6 of Next Gen. So,
wow, so close.
Yeah, but Guinan shows up a few more times through season 6 after O'Brien leaves. But I don't know why they didn't use her in the final season. She is in the first film. So we'll see her again, but she wasn't in the final season at all.
I'm excited that we finally get to start interlacing soon.
Yeah, that'll be next. Well, we have Star Trek 6 coming up in a few weeks, which will be the final original series film. And then after we finish season 5, I think it's mid-season 6 when DS9 premieres, and we'll go back and forth. And then once Next Gen goes off the air, we only get maybe half a season of DS9 by itself before Voyager premieres. So, and Generations was like only 6 months after Next Gen went off the air. So they didn't have any break in filming between the end of the series and the first Next Gen movie, which has original series actors in it. This episode was directed by one of our regulars, Les Landau. It was written by 2 of the big guys, Michael Piller and Rick Berman, have story by, and then teleplay by Michael Piller. We've talked a lot about them. So this was clearly Ro was a carefully considered, planned part of the show and not just to throw in a random guest star. My alternate episode is I want to see Crusher's date with this Caber or the Bajoran that danced with her, jazz, whatever they did. I'm very curious to see. Although I feel like we've seen similar Crusher episodes and they weren't good, I still want to see that one and her dancing. Alternate episode, Steven?
Mine is Ro in the City. Colleen's been doing a Sex in the City rewatch, so it'd be Ro, and she does have Troy and Crusher sit down, and then Guinan comes in, and so it's I guess Ro in the Starship I guess might work better.
I mean, funny enough, Kim Cattrall, who I often think of with the same category of actress as Michelle Forbes, is in Star Trek 6 that we're about to watch. So
yeah. Yeah, I got to work on my Samantha jokes for that podcast.
She's not very sexual in that movie. She's a Vulcan.
I'll find a way to.
Who was your annoyance in this episode?
Kennelly. Yeah.
I thought they said Kennedy for a minute, but Kennelly.
Oh, you mean Admiral Kennelly?
Yeah, Admiral.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm choosing him as well. I don't know how you choose anybody else, but maybe Keith will surprise us and pick somebody else.
Ro, maybe, but Admiral, I suppose.
I mean, Riker had annoyance when he told her to remove the earring. Picard had annoyance jumping to conclusions about her, but in the end, you got to go with the Admiral. Who do you want to have a drink with?
Ro. Even if she'll blow me off. You got to try.
She needs a good friend to have a drink with, and I think she'd be an excellent friend once you got to know her. So I'm also going to choose Ro.
I would try, but probably fail. I mean, I'd probably, mind if I sit here? Yes. Well, I tried.
That's it. So. I think I would just sit down. Oh, you said no? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. Well, I'm already here.
See, I would probably listen to her and not sit there then, but then over many nights of seeing her, and I'd always not make some sign of her at her, hey, and maybe eventually I'd wear her down and she'd be like, come sit with me.
It'd be like a Groundhog Day thing. It's you coming in every night. Mind if I sit here? No. Mind if I sit here? No. I
would not have the courage to keep asking, but I'd make, if I was interested in getting to know her, I'd make a little eye contact maybe. And I don't know. Hopefully she'd be like, oh, he always acknowledges me. Let's give him half a chance to maybe be friends. I don't know. Probably not. She probably wouldn't ever.
Or
she'd
maybe it's
start staying in her quarters at that point.
maybe it's not Groundhog Day, and it's mind if I sit here? No. Mind if I sit here? Yes. Mind if I sit here? Yes. And then eventually she says no. I mean, if you just keep
asking,
she doesn't mind. Yeah. At some point, I guess she changed the question.
Oh, you mean like a Daffy Duck thing?
Duck season, rabbit season.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Ranking the episode. We have only had 3 episodes. Better or worse than Redemption Part 2?
I think I'd put it behind it, but that's
As in lower?
yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Keith?
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean,
I would have gone above,
Yeah.
but you guys have it below. I would have put it for number 1 of the season so far. I liked this more. A lot to do with her. Right below that is Darmok. Better or worse than Darmok?
ooh.
Well, considering I would have put it above Redemption, I would put it above Darmok. But I also liked all 3 of these episodes. I know we talked about with Darmok, like, I'll probably like it more as time goes on than I did after first watching it, but I liked these 3 episodes. I feel like we're getting to a point where Next Gen doesn't really have bad episodes anymore. They just have ones that are not as good as others.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. As I messaged you earlier, I can see why there are some holes in Darmok anyway, even if I were inclined to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
yeah, I think this one was more important and had more going on. So probably above Darmok.
Darmok is more iconic. It gets quoted a lot more. But yeah, I would put this above. Keith says above. Steven?
Yep.
Okay. So this is number 2 of 3. Very middling episode. Next week, Silicon Avatar, the crystalline entity returns. The reoccurring guest character we were all itching to have back on the series. And the Enterprise takes aboard a scientist to help track her down. But her personal agenda does not match Captain Picard's.
So wait, we'll talk about it next week, the crystalline entity. That's also my favorite band.
Until then, live long.
In the Bajoran sense of the word, and prosper.
Yeah. I thought your favorite band was the Fierce Slime.
The Bajorans an ancient culture, but at the moment of this Star Trek, they're like enslaved and or on the run. So when Steven says live long like the Bajorans, does he hope that our lives go downhill and have a bad period?
Originally, I was going to say in the pejorative sense, and I was like, no,
Right.
I'll say in the Bajoran sense. But
Yeah. Okay.
not in the Bajoran sense, I guess I should have said.
It's All Been Done presents.
Who's got the time?